So this video, we're going to look about understanding the apprenticeship journey. And what I thought would be useful, Ziggy, is for us to talk about a typical journey and what the standards are, who the agencies are involved in those standards, where the certificates come from, how they're awarded, because it can get quite confusing, can't it?
Yes, it certainly can. There's a lot of understanding of what standards are, what EPA is, knowledge, skills, behaviours, and then how to evidence all of that.
Lovely. So shall we start with some very basic things? So who are Ofsted?
Ofsted is the governing body that looks at and assesses the quality of teaching and training that we are providing you. They make sure that we're adhering to quality and compliance measures, but also that we are providing you with all the necessary tools and information that you need to be successful in your programme.
So who are the ESFA?
ESFA is the Education Skills Funding Agency, and they are the ones that are another governing body that are providing the funding for your qualification.
Lovely, thank you. So let's move into the more technical bits then. Who's an awarding organisation and what do they do?
The awarding organisation is the recognised body that will give you your certificate, and where they are setting the standards and we are teaching those standards.
Okay, lovely. And then the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education
is the body that is overseeing all apprenticeship provision across the nation.
Lovely. So, I mean, that's just to begin with, isn't it? I mean, we don't make it easy for people, do we? So that gives people an idea of just about all of the bodies involved in an apprenticeship. So when we start, I know you said earlier in our welcome video that we start off with that initial assessment. So by now, people should have had their diagnostics, initial assessments, which basically tells us where they're at, that diagnostic for English and maths, which tells us the gaps in their learning. And then they've got access to the BKSB online platforms, and that creates a gap analysis tool and helps you plug the areas of learning. They also do their skill scan, and from that skill scan, we identify what they can currently do and what they can't, and that's done through that recognition of prior learning piece of work. And I'm right in saying, aren't I, Ziggy, that you can't repeat a piece of work. So if you've already done a piece of learning, you need to let us know so we can adjust that programme to you.
Yes, absolutely. And this is done essentially through the skill scan, which it really does identify your current skills and then any gaps that are required.
Absolutely. And the reality is, if you already know something, then you're not learning. Am I right?
No, absolutely, 100%.
And that's one of the key focuses from Ofsted and ESFA, isn't it? To make sure that apprentices are learning new skills.
100%, yes.
And the fact that the apprenticeship gives them a destination, a new outcome that they wouldn't have achieved without it.
Yes.
Putting it in layman's terms. Perfect.
Yeah.
So once we start our journey, you've already said that we have this different processes, and you use different bits of terminology. So I want to be clear on some of these terminologies for people. So we talked about teaching and learning. That was the very first thing you said. What does teaching and learning mean to you?
Teaching and learning is where your tutor is facilitating an opportunity for you to gain new knowledge. And this could be done through research or them presenting the knowledge to you, you going away and finding out from other people like your employer that you're in as well, basically. And learning is then onboarding all of that and actually applying it to the role that you're doing.
Magic. And I think that's a really good way of explaining that. So therefore, teaching and learning is an essential part of an apprenticeship.
It's the absolute essential, but it's the whole process of the apprenticeship.
If you're not learning something, then you're not in learning.
No, absolutely.
So let's talk about assessment. And I know assessment then confuses people because they think assessment is still teaching and learning. You can learn in reflection, but that's not what it is. Am I right?
Absolutely, 100%.
So how would you describe assessment? What is assessment?
Assessment is you showing us that you can actually do the work, that you've then actually applied the work. And assessment can take place summatively at the end, as per your EPA, which we'll probably explain a little bit later on as well, but also formatively, in that you will get feedback on your assignments. You might have observations and you'll get feedback on that. You may get testimonials from your employers and you'll get feedback on that, and really looking at whether the learning is being applied or not.
Marvellous. And I think there's another key term here, which probably seems the right time to bring that in, and that's about progress. So what does progress look like to you?
Progress is you are actually changing the way that you're doing something because you found a better way of doing it, or you've learned something that has enabled you to run something or work in a more efficient way, basically.
Marvellous, thank you for that. And I think those terminologies are really useful for all learners, because we're all guilty, aren't we, of using terminology sometimes, expecting people to know, but there's never this,
and they're not. Yes. And what does that mean? Yes.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And we just nod and smile and carry on. Yes. Lovely. So I think it's worthwhile saying that the apprenticeship standards aren't the same for all apprenticeships, and this causes some confusion out there.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is you've got some programs where you have an on-program qualification, such as a diploma awarded by an awarding organisation, and some don't have any on-program. It's all through teaching and learning and that summative assessment, formative and summative assessment at the end. Yeah. And I think really what people need to do if they're not sure about their programs is obviously go back to their tutors and discuss that, because there's a real misunderstanding across different standards, I think. So when we do a piece of work, we talk about holistic assessment. Do you want to talk about what holistic assessment means across the board?
Yeah, holistic assessment is when you're doing, sometimes you might be used to, when you're at school or college, doing unit by unit learning. So they give you a course program and they say, right, we're going to do unit 1 first, and then we're going to do unit 2 first. With holistic assessment, we look at overall where it is best to start your journey, taking on board what you already know, what you don't know, taking on board what you should know to start off with, which is going to then help kind of give you more information and more impact on the rest of your learning that you're going to do.
Lovely. That's a really good way of explaining it. And I think the other thing that's different to work-based learning is we treat people as adults, don't we? You know, yes. This is a co-production, meaning it's a two-way relationship. Mm-hmm. So as a learner, you are responsible as well for looking for opportunities and discussing those with the tutor, because, you know, and we'll talk from my personal experience. As a tutor, I know my industry, but I don't know everyone's. I don't know different sectors, and therefore as a learner you may know great opportunities for evidence, and you need to tell me that so we can, like you very much said, plan around that to get that nice piece of holistic work that shows this. Lovely. So as we go through the apprenticeship and we're achieving either an on-program qualification, we're working towards the standards. So this is the knowledge, skills and behaviours that you mentioned earlier. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Institute for Apprenticeship with their knowledge, skills and behaviours?
Yeah, knowledge, skills and behaviours are the 3 components of every apprenticeship standard. The knowledge is where you are actually learning sort of technical skills, and you may need to go away and do some research and learn theories on and how they inform in reality the skills, which is what you're going to be able to demonstrate, which is then you're going to take the knowledge, the theories that you've learned in the knowledge, and then put them into practice in a practical way. So, you know, instead of just learning 2 + 2 is 4, it's what can you do with that? And then, yeah, show us that you can put it into practice. And then the behaviours element is the behaviours that you need, like the enthusiasm and the taking the initiative to, like you just said earlier on, go away and get the information and tell us that, oh, look, this is what I've done already that can demonstrate the skill and this knowledge that I've worked. So it's marrying them all together.
Lovely. And I think it's a great phrase there, isn't there? Tell me what you do, tell me why you do it, and tell me how it suits your practice.
Yes.
And the other one is about personal learning thinking skills, isn't it? You know, employers want to see creativity. They want to see people that are able to think independently. So the more you learn those skills on an apprenticeship, the more employable undoubtedly you're going to be.
Yes.
And you don't want to be one of those apprentices that sit back and go, oh, it's not my fault because this didn't happen. If something's not happening, we tell you all the way through the journey. You've got a complaints procedure, you've got an appeals procedure, you can contact the office, you can let us know that something's not working. And that's part of that, being a responsible learner. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And that goes back to developing that relationship with that tutor as well. You call it a two-way partnership. It's also a three-way partnership. The employer is part of that process too, if you want them to be.
Lovely, thank you. So we've kind of got the on-programme bit, we've got the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and we're on programme for whatever the government has given that estimated time. And that alters per level and per employer, because again, that's been negotiated with the training provider, the employer and the learner. And again, that's altered depending on recognition of prior learning. So if you've got something you can take off, you may be on a slightly shorter programme. As we complete the apprenticeship, you've already spoken about a review. Do you want to just to go in a bit more about what that review process looks like and why we're doing it?
The review progress takes place every sort of 8 to 12 weeks. And it will be a review that you have with your employer and your tutor. And we're reviewing feedback on your previous work, and we're reviewing where you are in terms of your standards. It's almost like, are you on schedule with completing in the time frame that you've been set to complete the programme. We'll talk about smart targets, whether you've hit those smart targets. We'll also talk about your career aspirations and progression, where you see yourself in at the end of the programme, but also then 12 months after that, 3 years after that, and 5 years after that. Where do you want yourself to be? And your employer knowing this, hopefully we can plan your next steps to get to your progression.
Lovely. And I think that kind of leads quite nicely into independence advice and guidance throughout, isn't it? So you've got that kind of getting on, being in the middle bit of moving on and moving off. Because again, we want to see purpose. We're using public funds and we want to see a real purpose for this apprenticeship. Lovely. And as we complete then the reviews and we're getting towards the end, we then we enter that pivotal part, which is the gateway. Do you want to explain a bit about the gateway?
I'll try. The gateway is the point at which you're entering into EPA, and it's different for every standard, with lots of different endpoint assessment organisations. This is where we've now collated all the evidence and the information that's needed to put forward to the endpoint assessment organisation, who then put you through to your actual endpoint assessment. And this could consist of tests that could be multiple choice tests. It may involve a presentation that you deliver, a professional discussion or an interview from the independent assessor, who then will using that information say, yes, you have shown all the skills, you have shown all that you can use all the knowledge to show all the skills, and you've got the right behaviours there in place as well.
Excellent, thank you for that. So at the end of my apprenticeship, ultimately, I could end up with almost a mini portfolio of qualifications and an apprenticeship. So I'm going to have my functional skills evidence of English and maths, because that's a minimum requirement. I may have any on-programme qualifications, such as a diploma or a certificate as identified in the assessment plan. And then finally, I've got that piece of work, which, like you said, could be witness testimonies or other evidence to support that. And then I have my endpoint assessment and I get my completion certificate. And that becomes the end of the journey. Yes. So once you've completed all of this, what would be your number one piece of advice to the students or the apprentices?
Not to stop learning.
Marvellous. As we always say, you never stop.
You never stop learning.
And what we'll do, I'm sure I'm going to see you in the next video where we start look at safeguarding equality in health and safety.
Lovely. Thank you.